Okay, well, good afternoon and welcome everyone to our webinar. My name is Brendon Baatz and I'm the Senior Manager of the Utilities Program at ACEEE. Today we're going to discuss our most recent report, the 2017 Utility Energy Efficiency Scorecard. This report ranks the 51 largest electric utilities on energy efficiency performance, programs, and policies. We're very excited to release the report and discuss it with everyone today. We're also very excited to have Stacey Paradis from the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, Cyrus Bhedwar from the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, and Samantha Caputo from the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships with us to discuss the report results. So for those who aren't aware of us, ACEEE, or the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, is a national nonprofit research organization focused on end-use energy efficiency, technology, and policy. We work in a number of areas, including buildings, industry, behavior, economics and finance, and utilities. We also work on the state, local, and federal levels, as well as some international work. So the format of our webinar today is simple. We'll begin with Grace Relf, the lead author of the scorecard, presenting the high-level findings of the report. We'll then hear a response and some commentary on the report from representatives from the regional energy efficiency organizations on the call today. And then we also should have about 15 to 20 minutes for questions at the end of the webinar. So a few quick housekeeping items. We will be archiving the webinar, and we'll send out an email announcement shortly afterwards on how to access that archived webinar. All attendees on the webinar are also muted for the duration of the webinar. So if you have any technical problems or any other questions, comments, or feedback, I ask you to just submit that in the questions box on the GoToWebinar drop-down menu. And like I said, we've saved about 15 to 20 minutes of time for questions at the end. So please share your questions for the Q&A period in that questions box as well. So now I'd like to introduce our panel of speakers. First, we'll have Grace Relf from ACEEE. Grace is a research analyst in the Utilities Program and lead author of the report. Grace's research at ACEEE focuses on utility sector efficiency programs and policies. Following Grace, we'll hear from Stacey Paradis from the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, or MEEA. Stacey is the executive director at MEEA, which is a collaborative organization working to advance energy efficiency in 13 Midwestern states. We'll then hear from Samantha Caputo, a research associate from the Northeast Energy Efficiency Partnerships, or NEEP. NEEP works to advance energy efficiency in 7 states in the Northeast. And then finally, we'll hear from Cyrus Bhedwar, the policy director for the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, or SEEA. SEEA promotes energy efficiency in 11 southeastern states. Now I'd like to kick off the webinar with Grace's review of our scorecard.
Great. Hi, everyone, and thank you for your interest in the report and for attending the webinar today. I'm Grace Relf, the lead author of the scorecard. Today I'll be walking you through an overview of the report's methodology, its structure, and findings, and then we'll delve a little bit more deeply into highlights from the 3 different categories of metrics: quantitative, program, and policy metrics. So with this scorecard, we wanted to showcase utility sector efficiency efforts and to provide a large data set to utilities, regulators, and stakeholders. We really hope that the report and its data provide a good roadmap on how to drive efficiency forward and to help these stakeholders capture the important benefits that efficiency provides both to utilities and to their communities. We selected the 51 largest electric utilities by retail sales volume, looking specifically at state jurisdictional utilities rather than on their parent or holding companies. We only look at the electric side of things and focus largely on customer end-use efficiency. We also aim to capture performance from within the utility's service territory because some utilities work with third-party administrators to deliver their programs. So to start the process, we collected public reports and filings that include data for each of the 18 metrics that we developed. We wanted to capture a good cross-section of the utility sector efficiency landscape with our metrics, keeping in mind availability of quality data and the relative importance of each metric. We also worked with utility contacts to fill in gaps and to confirm our data. As a first of its kind report, we did run into a couple of challenges. For example, utility data is often reported inconsistently and can be difficult both to find and then interpret. I would also note that the data in the report may not match exactly to what utilities have reported themselves, and this is because we adjusted the data to not include any renewable energy or demand response numbers, and we also adjusted all of the data to be net savings at the generator. So the report covers 3 broad categories of utility efficiency. The metrics shown in these tables list the abbreviated metric name. For example, the peak demand reduction metric looked at peak demand reduction as a percentage of the utility's total peak demand. So category 1 covers quantitative savings and spending performance, and this is the most heavily weighted category with half of the total available points. And we weighted this most heavily because savings are often considered the most important end goal of efficiency that really drive those additional benefits. Category 2 focuses largely on utility programs because these are typically how utilities deliver efficiency to their customers. Program diversity and emerging metrics are the most heavily weighted metrics within the category, and the other metrics focus more on specific programs that are also important to a well-rounded and effective portfolio. We also look specifically at low-income programs because these signal program equity from the utility, and these programs are especially important because low-income customers can often benefit more than others from improved home health and lower electric bills, and these programs also provide good savings opportunities for the utilities. Category 3 looks at policies that drive savings in both the present year and into the future. For example, we evaluate the stringency of energy savings targets because these have been shown to really drive savings performance. And we looked specifically at internal utility targets, but these are often heavily influenced by state energy efficiency resource standards that mandate energy savings. The metrics in Category 3 also look at policies that give incentives to utilities to provide efficiency. One of these that we've included is decoupling, which separates utility income from their electricity sales. And this is important because utilities can be hesitant to deliver efficiency when it does reduce their revenue. Rigorous EM&V is also critical because it verifies savings and provides utilities with information on how to more effectively design and deliver their programs. So this is a map that shows all of the 51 utilities we evaluated. It shows the top 10 in green and the next 10 in orange. The group of utilities we covered represent 54% of the 2015 U.S. electric retail sales, and they are located in 31 different states. In the end, we had 2 utilities tie for the top spot. Eversource Massachusetts and National Grid Massachusetts both earned 91% of the points. The top finishers come from 8 different states, and notably 9 of these utilities are in states that finish in the top 10 in ACEE's State Energy Efficiency Scorecard as well. And this really highlights the importance of state and regulatory support for efficiency. I would also note that there are pairs of utilities in the top 10 that come from the same parent company but are in different states, like Excel Colorado and Excel Minnesota. So company support is also critical to performance. The bottom 10 utilities come largely from the Southeast and the Midwest, where a lot of their programs are just beginning to develop and where state and regulatory support for efficiency might not be as strong. This table shows a breakdown of regional results from the scorecard with the Northeast and the West performing the best. In each region, there were utilities that did well and others that need improvement. And again, I would say that this indicates that company commitment to efficiency is very important to performance. So now we'll delve more deeply into specific results from each category. This chart shows the top 10 finishers in Category 1, the quantitative metrics, and the percentage of points that they achieved in this category. Importantly, the top 5 achievers in Category 1 are also the top 5 utilities overall, And this is not surprising because these metrics were the most heavily weighted, and we did this because energy and demand savings are really critical to achieving the benefits that come with efficiency, and spending is also a strong indicator of how much a utility will save. In this category, the utilities earned an average of 32% of points. The most heavily weighted metric in the report is net savings achievement as a percentage of retail sales. Looking at the data in quartiles in this graph really shows just how far ahead the two leaders are. Eversource Massachusetts and National Grid Massachusetts on the far right of the graph both achieved over 3% savings, which is very impressive. Two more also achieved over 1.5% savings. On average, the 51 utilities as a group only reached about 0.9% savings of their retail sales. And to give this finding a little bit of context, in 2014, ACEEE looked at 14 of the very best efficiency program administrators in the country, and 8 of those 14 achieved savings higher than 1.5%. The average savings of that group of exemplary programs were nearly double that of this group of utilities. I would also note, though, that there are utilities not included in this report that are achieving well below the average as well. Category 1 revealed a couple of other interesting things. The group of utilities on average reduced their peak demand by about 0.76% of their total peak demand, and 4 utilities reduced their peak demand by more than 2%. This is important because electricity and capacity needed to meet that peak demand is expensive and can drive up utility and customer costs. We also looked at lifetime savings to gauge the long-term commitment of utilities to efficiency and found that the top 10 scores in this metric had a portfolio average useful life of over almost 13 years. But this was really not that far off from the group average, which was 11 years. And to me, this indicates that the utilities that did well in lifetime savings were not simply implementing measures with significantly higher lifetimes, but that they were more committed to incremental savings. Also interesting was the high rate of target achievement, leading us to conclude that targets could be set much higher to drive additional savings. One of the best performers in Category 1 was Baltimore Gas and Electric, the number 4 utility overall. Their programs are driven by the Empower Maryland Smart Energy Savers Program, which is a statewide efficiency initiative. The state is also supportive of efficiency through policies like decoupling and strong statewide energy savings goals. These policies really helped BGE to achieve high energy and demand savings and led them to be the number 1 achiever in demand reduction, with a reduction of over 2.5% of their total peak. Notably, they also received full points for emerging programs, meaning that they're really a leader in cutting-edge technologies. They run programs like conservation voltage reduction to improve distribution system efficiency, market transformation initiatives like midstream lighting, and they also provide their customers with real-time energy use data so that those customers can better manage their usage. In Category 2, we found some interesting trends across utility program offerings. This chart shows the most and least common programs evaluated under the program diversity metric. One of the most interesting things we noted was that residential programs, shown in blue, were much more common than the commercial industrial programs. 4 out of the 5 least common programs were C&I programs, and it is reasonable to think that some of these, like agricultural programs, would be less common, but others we might think would be more widespread, like kitchen and restaurant efficiency programs. This chart shows the number of utilities running programs for other metrics included in Category 2. A good number of utilities, or 29 of them, ran at least one program, pilot program in 2015, meaning that they are innovating and trying new things. On the other end of the spectrum, only 19 offered electric vehicle-specific charging rates, and only 8 utilities are working towards zero net energy buildings. Southern California Edison did particularly well in Category 2 and came in 6th overall. They only missed half a point and had very strong portfolio of program offerings. They offered 20 out of 22 programs we looked at and offered 9 out of the 11 emerging areas we looked at. They also ran 12 different pilots in 2015. Some of these included collaboration with a large number of local governments to improve their long-term efficiency planning and goal setting, and they also help to identify and implement specific efficiency projects for those governments. Additionally, they provided loans for families implementing home energy upgrades, and a lot of their efforts were specifically geo-targeted to areas with potential for savings or in constrained areas of their territory, which they called their preferred resources pilot. This slide breaks down some of the Category 3 metrics by the number of utilities implementing them. These policies drive long-term planning and savings, which are really important when considering efficiency as a way for utilities to defer or avoid building new power plants in the future. In this category, the utilities earned about half of the points on average, and it is definitely impressive that some of these areas are being implemented by more than 30 utilities. On the other hand, some of these are definitely just a starting point. For example, while more than 75% of the utilities have time of use rates, subscription to those rates remains low. And while performance incentives are definitely a great step towards encouraging utilities to deliver efficiency, it still does not correct for lost revenue from efficiency, and only 16 utilities in our group have full revenue decoupling. These policies are often heavily influenced by regulators, but utilities also play a strong role in their adoption, and there's a lot of room for improvement here. Xcel Minnesota did very well across the board and in Category 3, and they tied for 10th overall. I wanted to highlight Xcel's electric vehicle promotion because these can be used as a grid resource for efficiency when they're promoted and implemented thoughtfully. Xcel has a range of educational materials on their website for electric vehicles, and they promote 3 different rate structures for electric vehicle owners based on how those owners might use their vehicle. Interestingly, Xcel has 456 subscribers to their time of use rates, which is much higher than a lot of the utilities included in the scorecard. And this indicates to me that their extensive education on their website may be encouraging customers to take advantage of that rate option. So what does this mean? Utilities are doing a lot to promote efficiency. It's impressive that 4 utilities achieved savings of over 1.5% of their sales. And across the 51 utilities, we found a total of almost 600 program offerings and 200 emerging program or technology offerings. However, the average score was still just 41%, indicating that there is a lot of room for growth in the sector, but this is very exciting. And as I've mentioned throughout this presentation, these results really highlight how important state and regulatory support for efficiency are, and we hope that this helps to provide a roadmap of how to realize the many benefits of efficiency to utilities and their customers. Thanks very much, and I'll be happy to take any questions at the end of the webinar.
All right, well, thank you, Grace, for that presentation. That was very thorough, and I'd just like to remind folks participating on the webinar to please submit questions in your question box, and we will get to the Q&A after the next 3 speakers. So now I'd like to introduce again Stacey Paradis from the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Thanks, Brendon. Thanks, Grace. Yeah, this is Stacey Paradis. I'm with the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. I'm our executive director. Just to tip it off, since I'm the first one, we are one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations that's recognized by the Department of Energy. We're all formed a little differently, so I'll let the other ones speak to how they're put together. MEEA was started in 2000, so we've been around here about 17 years. We are a membership-based nonprofit, which means our membership includes anyone that's a stakeholder in energy efficiency. So that's going to include your investor-owned utilities, munis, and co-ops, as well as state and local governments, all the various implementers, evaluators, manufacturers, retailers, and contractors, as well as advocates and academic and research organizations. So we really focus on trying to get the most energy efficiency in the Midwest that is achievable and that is cost effective. So with that, a couple things we wanted to share about the scorecard. Overall, our reaction to it is very good. As people have seen over the last 6 years, really, energy efficiency has done a substantial investment here, the growth that has happened in the Midwest. In 2015, which is the year of the focus on this report, our total cumulative savings across our region were close to $1.7 billion. And in that, we've had We do have folks at the top, we do have folks in the middle, and we do have folks on the bottom in our 13 states. So a couple of things I wanted to go through and recognize. One of the key things that I wanted to highlight is obviously with ACEEE they were challenged on what was going to be, how are they going to pick the number of people in the race. And they went with the 51 largest utilities, which is always a great focus. I do want to highlight, though, we have 7 different utilities that have EE spending and, more importantly, energy savings that are 10 times more than Alabama Power, which is the lowest, the 51st utility on the scorecard, just based on the size. I should highlight numerous of our utilities in Indiana. What was interesting about Indiana, 2015, which is again the focus of the scorecard, was the first year after the repeal of their energy efficiency programs. And why I think it's important to note, not only is Duke, Indiana in this list, but also if you look at the 4 other investor-owned utilities, Indianapolis Power and Light, Dayton Power and Light, Vectren and NIPSCO, as well as Indiana Michigan Power, they all have megawatt savings in excess of 125,000. So this is, again, 10 to 15 times larger than the 51st utility in this report. The other thing I wanted to note, yes, I would agree with Grace that having that regulatory mandate in place obviously creates that substantial network to support energy efficiency. I should note that aside from Duke, Indiana, Ameren, Missouri is also very highly ranked in this report, and they are also in a voluntary environment. But I would agree with ACEEE, one of the most important things is what is that regulatory structure and what are those incentives that are in place that are really encouraging the utilities to make sure that they have all 3 legs of the energy efficiency stool, which is essential to getting return for their shareholders. So those are a couple things on the regulatory side that I really wanted to highlight. But a couple of other things that are kind of fun to note about us here in the Midwest. We expect that our growth in this area is only going to increase. We've had recent legislation in December in Illinois and Michigan. We already have Commonwealth Edison in the top 10. Ameren, Illinois is very close. And then you have DTE and Consumers in Michigan. Both of them are going to have an immediate increase in the growth of and the investment and the savings that are going to come from their energy efficiency programs. And both of those are going to be tied to increased incentives that are going to be put in place for those utilities. So that is very important. In Ohio, which was also going through some regulatory challenges in 2015, their mandate was put on a pause. It is impressive to note, though, that AEP Ohio is still very high in the report, Duke, Ohio doing well. Even First Energy, which is not a supporter at all of energy efficiency, they still have investment savings in there. And we should note, too, that Dayton Power and Light, although they're not in this report, also has substantial savings of over 172,000 megawatts on an annual basis in 2015. A couple of other things that we're very proud of in the Midwest. If you look at, although lifetime savings is what ACEEE focused on, unfortunately in the Midwest, for all of our states, we only focus on first-year savings. We are starting to see a regulatory trend moving towards lifetime savings, and that is something that actually came up in the new Illinois legislation. So again, we see further opportunities for growth that's going to happen both in the scorecard and an additional, more importantly, energy savings from energy efficiency going forward. I would be remiss if I didn't do a shout out to our friends at AEP Ohio. They were the #1 for low-income programs in the country, in the entire scorecard, and Grace is exactly right. It is so important that we focus those investment and maximize on that savings for that low-income community, because they are the ones that can really most benefit from it. The last thing I wanted to put in, last 2 things. One, we're really excited about the recognition on the number of pilot programs. As we know, all of our states are different. All utility territories are different. So it is important that we are looking into pilots and looking in what are those new technologies so we can keep our savings through energy efficiency to grow in the future as we already take advantage of that low-hanging fruit. And lastly, this report is great and it's focusing on the electric side and where those savings are. I should note, when you add in the natural gas savings, both in states that have mandates and those that are voluntary, you're going to have substantial increases for our consumers as well as the environmental benefits of both the economic impact and the environmental impact that comes from those energy efficiency programs. So overall, we're very excited about the scorecard. As with the ACEEE State Scorecard, it always gets people's attention. I think it's a nice opportunity for, again, to build on regulatory trends that we're seeing in the Midwest. In particular, lifetime savings, but also there's a growing interest on the low-income side that's really important. And that's really going to impact what our opportunities are going forward in that regulatory environment. So overall, very excited about the scorecard. Obviously, as always, we get a little upset when some of our good performers aren't included in it, but these things happen. But again, we want to give a little shout out to our friends at Alliant Energy, Indianapolis Power and Light, Dayton Power and Light, Vectren, NIPSCO, and Indiana Michigan Power, who are all doing substantial investments in their energy efficiency savings and really generating a lot of savings. So with that, I'll answer questions at the end of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacey. So again, we're getting a lot of questions about the webinar being archived, and I just wanted to remind folks that it will be archived, and we're going to send out a follow-up email after about where to access that, and it'll definitely be available. So next, we're going to go to Samantha Caputo from NEEP.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for having me here today. So just a little brief bit about NEEP. So we are also one of the 6 regional energy efficiency organizations. We were founded in 1996, and we are celebrating our 21st anniversary this month. So that's exciting to have been around for such a long period of time. And our mission is really working with our 12 states in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic to accelerate energy efficiency as an essential part of demand-side solutions that will really enable a sustainable regional energy system. So we're working to achieve an 80% reduction of carbon emissions by 2050, and that's a common goal across the majority of our states. So we're really trying to bring that goal together and work with a regional perspective on how we can drive that. And our vision is to embrace next generation energy efficiency as a core strategy to help meet this goal. And we do this by overcoming various barriers, working to transform markets through collaboration, education, and enterprise. And I'm Samantha Caputo. I'm a research associate here, and I manage our policy tracking and analysis as well as our regional energy efficiency database. And I also work within the EM&V forum. And so now a little bit about our reaction to the scorecard. We're also very excited to see it published, and we think that it's a very natural flow for ACEEE to publish this type of report. And we wanted to congratulate them on the first edition, and we look forward to see what else is to come. But we also think it's no surprise to see 2 of the top 2 utilities coming from Massachusetts, having been the #1 state for the State Energy Efficiency Scorecard for many years. But we also like to acknowledge that there's 4 states within our region up in the top 10, including Eversource, Connecticut, and Baltimore Gas and Electric. And they are also within the top 10 of the State Energy Efficiency Scorecard. So there's, again, definitely some symmetry there, and seeing how states' policies and regulatory framework really do drive utility energy efficiency. And one thing we do hope to see, as well as Grace has mentioned before, is really having this scorecard drive utilities to make changes and work to improve. We do see that a lot within the states. They see their score and try to figure out what they can do to improve their number within the ranking. And so the breakdown of the 3 categories that are used to score the utilities on their overall success in achieving the least cost electric and gas savings really does go to show the importance of the regulatory and policy support that states provide. And just an example of this is under the Energy Efficiency Program performance in Maryland, for every $1 spent on the Empower program, you'll see a $1.81 in benefits from that. So seeing it's definitely cost effective. And I know that Grace has already highlighted Baltimore Gas and Electric, and we're happy to see that highlight there within this category since they did excel here. I just wanted to reiterate the utility's success in achieving energy and demand side savings in their energy efficiency portfolio, and it's really nice to see that they have that demand side as well as the energy side, and how they work together to really excel in their total savings. And it also goes to show how these types of programs can really push utilities. And most recently this spring, the Empower program in Maryland was actually enacted into law. So we'll see that's the first state in our region to have required by law a certain % of savings. And then Massachusetts is another example where we really see the regulatory and policy framework pushing the utility success in the other categories. For instance, the Green Communities Act of 2008 in Massachusetts calls for all cost-effective energy efficiency, and this paired with the Energy Efficiency Resource Standard enacted in 2009, as well as the 3-year utility planning cycle that establishes how the targets set by the standard are to be met, have really enabled Eversource and National Grid to achieve 100% of the points in Category 3 and also excel in their performance within the other categories. So in 2015, their target was 2.68% of savings for Eversource and 2.78% and for National Grid, and both of those utilities achieved over 3%. So it really, again, shows how the policy framework can really drive the savings here. And during our current planning cycle for 2016 through 2018, that goal is 2.9%, and having seen them surpass that in 2015, I'm excited to see how they perform within this planning cycle as well. And another aspect of the categories that were mentioned with the program diversity in emerging areas, we're seeing a lot of change happening in our region with utility business models and the way that they're addressed moving forward and what the utility of the future is going to look like. And one place where we see this and is often looked to by other states is in New York with their Reforming the Energy Vision, also known as REV, which kicked off in 2014. And so this is a comprehensive energy strategy that's working to help consumers make more informed decisions about their energy choices, and is working to develop new energy products and services and integrate the market into the utility business model. And so many of these changes that are occurring with REV are envisioned and still in the process of being developed, so they're not captured within this scorecard. And I think we'll be looking forward to see in future scorecards here how REV impacts the New York utilities ranking here. And I think that this scorecard can really be used in New York to address some of the gaps that exist in REV to improve energy efficiency performance. So while undergoing this major change in New York, the policy support for energy efficiency has lagged with their energy efficiency resource standard expiring in 2015 and having recommendations within the Track 2 order of REV that calls for setting targets again, but there's been no consensus around that. So with having this lag and targets, some of the utilities haven't been performing as well with energy efficiency, and so we're not seeing them at the top within the scorecard. But I think that this scorecard can be used by those utilities to understand what are their strengths, where is there room to improve, and how can they incorporate that into the REV proceeding. But there have been examples of success there with Con Edison's Brooklyn Queens Demand Management Project of an example of deferring the need for distribution infrastructure and using energy efficiency to do that. So in conclusion, for our region, for all the states and utilities in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, the next real challenge that utilities are going to face is to align their energy efficiency programs with the public policy goals to reduce carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. And this includes advancing comprehensive energy efficiency as a part of distributed energy solutions that include demand management, energy storage, distributed generation enabled by smart grids. And I think that this scorecard really shows that the region has excelled in least cost electric efficiency, and but it's time to move the region towards using energy efficiency as a least cost carbon reduction resource. And NEEP has been doing a lot of work to kind of make this change and start this push. So we're working on a strategic electrification framework and action plan for the region. We're actually hosting a summit next week about that, as well as working in some emerging areas that are mentioned in the report, including air source heat pumps, electric vehicles. And so we're excited to see how these frameworks can be used to further the growth of the utilities within the framework, within the scorecard here, as well as push them beyond what the scorecard calls for and really start excelling at that carbon reduction. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Samantha. Definitely appreciate those comments. So now we'll go to our last speaker, Cyrus Bhedwar from the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance.
Good afternoon, and nice to be speaking with everybody today. As Brendon said, my name is Cyrus Bhedwar. I'm the Director of Policy for the Southeast Energy Efficiency Alliance, and we are the youngest RIO on the call. We will be celebrating our 10-year anniversary this year, and we're really pleased to be here with you today. We serve 11 states. Sometimes a region I like to describe it as anywhere you can get sweet tea and grits. And as Grace mentioned, many of the utilities in our region appear towards the end of the rankings, and that's consistent with the Southeast's relative newness to utility-delivered energy efficiency. Many utilities in the region, including some of those that are ranked higher in the rankings, have been delivering energy efficiency in earnest for 10 to 15 years. So I'll share reflections in a few areas. The first I'll touch on is what I think the scorecard does really well. Then I'll move on to some of the context in the Southeast that impacts the utilities rankings. And I'll wrap up with some questions I have that were prompted by the scorecard. So first, as with all of ACEEE scorecards, we find the utility scorecard a really helpful conversation starter, and I think some of my fellow speakers have also mentioned this. By really attempting to comprehensively capture the many dimensions of energy efficiency, the scorecard helps stakeholders to break out of kind of habitual ways of thinking about energy efficiency and challenges them to consider opportunities that they haven't before. And it does this in a few ways. First of all, it integrates a number of factors that contribute to energy efficiency. And I think perhaps even more than the state or city versions of the scorecard, the utility version goes beyond traditional energy efficiency to reflect a rapidly evolving utility industry. Issues like AMI and electric vehicles, which may not immediately have a direct impact on energy efficiency, but they create opportunities for utilities and customers that didn't exist previously, and ACEEE should really be applauded for reflecting these within a scorecard that focuses on energy efficiency. Next, it inventories approaches to energy efficiency that stakeholders may not have considered. By listing both existing and emerging program categories, the scorecard offers stakeholders a chance to consider approaches that they may have overlooked before. If a program administrator feels like he or she has exhausted or evaluated all possible options, they need only consult these lists to ensure it's really covered the gamut. So that's a really helpful tool as we move forward. And finally, it provides for peer learning. And I think, again, this has been mentioned before. While each utility situation is different, there are clearly lessons to be learned from peers that may be similarly situated, but ranked higher. And it's important to understand what they are doing that you can learn from. So we are excited about those components of the scorecard. I'll next move on to some of the context we see in the Southeast that contributes or impacts the utilities rankings here in the region. And both Stacey and Samantha rightly, and as well as Grace, pointed out the really important impact of state policy and regulatory environment. And I think that's very true here in the Southeast. It can even affect a utility's willingness to consider offering energy efficiency in some cases. I think the scorecard confirms that states with supportive policy or regulatory environments, such as Arkansas with its energy efficiency resource standard, and Duke and Progress in North Carolina, which are driven in part by the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Portfolio Standard, are clearly found higher in the rankings than some of their peers. In contrast, there are other states where policymakers might place greater emphasis on things like the rate impact measure as a cost effectiveness test. In states like Virginia and Florida, where that is the case, those utilities can be faced with obstacles to increasing their energy efficiency portfolios. So while the state scorecard did acknowledge the role of policy, it does end up ranking the utilities, and that can leave the impression that the utilities drive much of this policy, whether or not that is in fact the case. And over the years of working on energy efficiency in the South, I've observed a few trends that contribute to the region's placement in these rankings. So the first is poverty. The Southeast is the poorest region of the country. And given the way energy efficiency costs are recovered, usually as a separate rider, many policymakers can be reluctant to be perceived as adding costs to customers' bills by advancing energy efficiency. The second, to no one's surprise, should be independence. There's a strong ethic of independence and self-sufficiency in the region. If it makes economic sense, people will do it. There's no sense in giving them a rebate, is a frequent refrain heard here in the Southeast. Issues of cross-subsidization, free ridership, and upward pressure on rates for non-participants all feature prominently in policymakers' articulation of their decisions about energy efficiency. And lastly, manufacturing. The Southeast continues to attract manufacturing as a means of economic development. This has two impacts. First, large customers tend to be strong advocates for low rates, which often means opposing energy efficiency programs and their associated riders. Second, as evidenced by the dominance of utility-scale solar and new nuclear units, policymakers can tend to be drawn to policy that supports larger, more capital-intensive projects and investments rather than distributed infrastructure like energy efficiency. So all of these factors and more can have a cumulative effect that discourages investment in energy efficiency by utilities, while policymakers really feel like they're achieving their priorities in the region. Of course, the Southeast does have supportive policy for energy efficiency, and it's developing new policy. Both Mississippi and Louisiana are currently actively involved in quick start energy efficiency programs and proceeding to developing rules for their comprehensive phase, which will include energy savings targets for the utilities in those states. The Southeast also has a lot of activity on low-income energy efficiency, and we would expect that to show up in future iterations of the utility scorecard. And finally, as Samantha just mentioned, another trend has been electrification, which creates new opportunities for talking about customer benefits and new ways to deploy technologies that have the effect of making energy efficiency more accessible to the region's customers. And there also, what the scorecard can't reflect is the numerous conversations and activities that are taking place on the ground every day among stakeholders that are trying to address some of the barriers, many of them inadvertent to energy efficiency, to ensure that everyone is better off by incorporating more energy efficiency in the right way in the region. And before I end with some questions prompted by the scorecard, I'd like to share a few ways in which SEEA is engaged in this conversation to expand the role and adoption of energy efficiency in the Southeast. Tomorrow at 2 p.m., we will be hosting our first ever members-only policy highlights webinar, which will survey some of the policy activity at the local, state, and federal level that's impacting energy efficiency. So if you're interested in the region itself, that might be a great opportunity to learn more and ask questions. Later this year, we'll be releasing our first energy efficiency policy survey that gathers stakeholder input on some of the key policy issues within energy efficiency. That'll help us understand which are the priorities for our stakeholders. And we'll be presenting the results of that survey during a session at our annual conference, October 17th and 18th in Atlanta. And lastly, and we are in debt to ACEEE for the inspiration, SEEA is developing a series of utility energy efficiency profiles that characterize the policy and regulatory landscape in each of the states we serve. And these are intended to be useful tools for those stakeholders looking to get involved in a given state's utility energy efficiency proceedings. They're a primer and a guide to how energy efficiency is addressed in each of the states we served. We've completed our profile from North Carolina, and we'll be releasing it later this year to be followed by profiles for our other states. So I'll close with a few questions that occurred to me as I looked through the scorecard. The first is, what are key steps utilities can take to achieve savings independent of state or regulatory policy? It was mentioned that both company and policy support is needed. What are those that stand out from the company perspective? Second is, how can stakeholders engage with ACEEE to dive deeper into the research reflected in the scorecard and understand what led to a particular ranking? And lastly, and I'll turn to our audience, who's in the running for the most improved when the next edition comes out? So with that, I'll close. Thank you.
Thank you, Cyrus. Definitely appreciate your comments there, and for also kicking off some of the questions. I'll actually answer, I think, one of the questions you asked, and that's how stakeholders can engage with ACEEE on this project and some of our results. And I would say Our contact information is available on our website, and we are definitely happy to engage with regulators, stakeholders, and utilities on this project and how we can help promote greater levels of efficiency in specific areas for specific utilities. So please just reach out to us, and we can definitely talk some more about different levels of engagement. So now we're going to go to a few questions from the audience, which are still flowing in. I definitely appreciate that. And the first question, though, I'd like to have Grace answer is, we had several clarifying questions about how we selected utilities and things of that sort. So I'd like Grace to just expand briefly on how we selected utilities for this report.
Sure. So in order to select the utilities for this report, we looked at EIA data on retail sales, and we looked at the 51 largest utilities. And we did not look at parent companies or holding companies, but purely state jurisdictional companies and operating companies. And so that did not include, utilities such as Tennessee Valley Authority, which does not provide efficiency itself, but its distribution companies does, and they were not large enough to make the 51. So it really was just the 51 largest utilities based on that EIA data.
Okay, thank you, Grace. So now I'm going to move into some of the questions, and the first question I'm going to ask was touched on already, I think, by all three Rio speakers, but I'm going to get into it a little bit more. And that is the relationship between regulatory policy and utility actions. And for us, that was really one of the challenging things of this project, was to present these rankings in a way that shows really what's happening within a specific utility service territory, but keeping in mind that utilities, they operate in a delicate environment of different policies, either from the state or local level. And I just would like to ask the speakers to talk a little bit more about what's happening in their regions related to regulatory actions versus utility actions, and how we might be able to bridge the gap on those interests.
Well, this is Stacey. I'm happy to jump in first. Obviously, we've had a ton of regulatory action that happened here in the Midwest. In the latter part of 2016, actually all in December of 2016, we had two pieces of major clean energy legislation that passed both in Illinois and Michigan that impacted not just energy efficiency but renewable energy and really the full gamut from there. The biggest part of that, as I noted in my remarks earlier, is in Illinois we did put in decoupling. They've also created incentive mechanisms. The one thing that we're really excited to track in Michigan is two things. One, they've put in a tiered incentive mechanism together for the utilities to increase them for additional energy savings over the mandated amount at a tiered rate to further recognize and encourage those utilities to do that. They've also established an IRP process, which they're in the process of implementing right now, that really targets energy efficiency as a supply-side option to, again, increase further investment there. So that's one thing that's happening on the legislative side, and as we've noted, we've had some challenges in energy efficiency in the Midwest, in Indiana, and in Ohio, where they have, in one state, repealed the standard, another one they froze it, with Governor Kasich's action to veto a repeal last year. The debate continues on the legislative session in Ohio, and they are tracking and looking at what are those other incentive mechanisms and what kind of support they're getting from the utilities in their states and in other states. So the fact that we have such strong support and strong investment by AEP Ohio really shows that there is support for those programs there. We just need to put together the right regulatory construct. And on the regulatory side at our commissions, obviously we have a lot of kind of next grid activities that are happening, the Utility 2.0 model. Our commissions are active in Illinois, Ohio, and Minnesota in those areas, as well as then the Michigan Commission and their Agency for Energy working aggressively on the IRP. So it is right that a lot of things are happening in that regulatory world. The challenge that comes with that regulatory world is twofold. A, nothing moves quickly. Everything takes time. The legislation that I noted, those were 2 years in development in both of those states. The other challenge that we have in the Midwest is we need to focus on messages for energy efficiency that reflect the people that are in charge. We have majority Republican governors, the majority of Republican majorities in our legislatures. How do we position energy efficiency so they are supportive of, in particular, the mandate that's in place? And that's really focusing on what are those economic benefits that come from it? What are the jobs that come from it? How does it save their constituents money? What does this mean? So we need to learn how to talk to the people that are in charge are kind of the biggest things that I've learned about, and we need to learn how to play not just a short game, but also a long game to make sure we're really well positioning energy efficiency for the future.
I would also add that I think more so on the utility side, utilities that scored well in this report were offering a very large breadth of programs. Some of those top utilities were offering upwards of 20 different programs. And I think utilities can, expand their program offerings in order to achieve savings. That might be something that they could do outside of the scope of, regulatory or state policy frameworks, although they are still influenced by that.
Cyrus or Samantha, did you have any?
Sure, I'll jump in. Go ahead, Samantha.
Sure. Okay. So just a quick comment about regulatory policy and utility action and some states in our region that are trying to close that gap there. You're seeing in Delaware as well as in New Hampshire policy implementing energy efficiency resource standards to really spur development and help those states set targets. And one thing that's kind of coinciding with that conversation and with these policies being implemented is addressing the cost effectiveness of energy efficiency programs within the states. And both states are currently going through the process of developing what their cost effectiveness framework is going to be. Are they going to address non-energy impacts as well? Delaware is developing guidance documents to help the utilities follow the regulatory process with the new energy efficiency resource standards. So it's really, you're seeing states starting to try to create a collaborative process there within their energy efficiency advisory councils as well, or their different committees within the commission to really work with the utilities on closing that gap and helping understand the regulatory process to spur energy efficiency programs.
And this is Cyrus. I think one of the most powerful forces we see in that respect is the opportunity for states to look to peers for examples and build on that. And you see that as the map shows, Arkansas has long been a leader through its energy efficiency resource standard and has had now kind of 10 years of experience implementing that. And both Mississippi and Louisiana are borrowing from the Arkansas model and experience, knowing that it's been tested, refined, and can be trusted to effectively operate. They're obviously making adaptations for their states, but a great big debt of thanks goes to those at the Arkansas Public Service Commission, both at the commission and staff level, for investing time and resources in helping Mississippi and Louisiana understand what works, what doesn't. That developing that trust in the models and in the regulatory policies is so important for the region, and we're glad to see that spreading.
Thank you, Cyrus. So I have really a few quick questions. The first one is about challenges for efficiency moving forward, either in your specific region or nationally. We had several questions on this, and I wanted to give the speakers some time to respond to that.
Sure, it's Stacey. I'll go first again. The biggest challenge that I have is that we're going to have here in the Midwest, again, with our Republican majorities, there is not a lot of support for additional mandates to get put through. That is just not a policy model that the people that are in charge are supportive of. So the question is aside from a mandate, what other regulatory environment, what other incentives can we put together that are going to support a greater investment in energy efficiency? And I think what we're talking about looking to those commissions and trying to at least clarify, as we're doing in Indiana right now, how do we define the three legs of the stool? How do we deal with lost revenue? How do we deal with cost recovery? How do we deal with incentives? So those are in place so the utilities, even if they don't have a mandate hanging over their head, have some regulatory certainty over what that investment would be, and then continuing to push that support through of why these programs are important, how it benefits those customers, and maybe get those governors more engaged to say how it would benefit their constituents is something that we're looking into in the future.
Hi, this is Samantha. So I think one of the big challenges we have here in our region is a lot of the savings that we've seen historically, especially with the 2015 data that's presented here in this scorecard, is a lot of it is coming from lighting, and we're seeing which is very positive, and we're happy to see that transition happening in the market being saturated by LEDs and making that switch in both residential and C&I sectors. But I think moving forward, and a discussion that we've had here too, is saying goodbye to lighting as our full force ahead of achieving energy efficiency savings. What's the new challenge, or what's the new aspect that we're going to tackle here to really achieve more savings and continue to push this region forward and maintain some of our top rankings here within the scorecard. So I think that's a challenge that we're facing here and trying to figure out what the solution to that is, what the next big thing is.
And for the Southeast, I'd say, it could be a number of things. Avoided costs are continually placing pressure on utility portfolios from a cost effectiveness point of view. But one of the interesting conversations I'm starting to have is where utilities and stakeholders can agree on a potential pathway forward in terms of addressing the utility business model, not only for efficiency, but for distributed energy in general. And with this new move to electrification. But the policymakers are not quite there yet. They're concerned about either actually or being perceived to be giving giveaways to large companies. They're concerned with changes to the current utility business model and the impacts that might have, intended or otherwise, on the customer base. So that's an emerging conversation that we're starting to get engaged with.
Very interesting. Well, I definitely appreciate those responses. I have one more quick question for folks who are winding down the last few minutes here. I just wanted to ask, this report was based on 2015 data. So I wanted to ask, what is new or what is exciting happening in your region or area since 2015 that we could highlight today for folks on the call?
Sure. So again, this is Stacey from the Midwest. The biggest thing to note is I've talked about this legislation that went through. We're going to have substantial increased investments that are going to happen in Illinois and in Michigan. With the removal of the rate cap in Illinois, we expect energy efficiency to get really close to that 2%, if not over that target that ACEEE was talking about. So absolutely, both of our utilities are going to be over the 1.5, and they're going to pass that by a lot. In Michigan, we expect additional further investments because of these incentives that have been put in place. But we're also really excited about the IRP investments that are happening both in Michigan and Indiana that are going to further hopefully increase support for energy efficiency and additional savings going forward. And then we have our old school actors in Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin that are going to continue, I think, to grow in those areas. And we're looking for growth in some of our non-mandated states. I think Missouri, you've seen recognition on this report about Ameren, Missouri, but I think you're also going to see increased numbers coming in from Kansas City Power and Light based on their increased investments in that non-mandated environment in Missouri.
Hi everyone, this is Samantha with NEEP, and so I wanted to highlight Rhode Island here and what's happening there. So I know National Grid, Rhode Island wasn't a utility that made it onto the scorecard size-wise, being such a small, tiny little state up here in the Northeast. But they're doing huge things here. They are reevaluating their cost effectiveness framework and developing their own state framework for evaluating energy efficiency programs. And this is much aligned with the National Standard Practice Manual that was recently released. I think it's in our region a first example of a state that's really developing a framework that works for them, aligns with their policy goals, and is really going to push them over the top. And they're definitely catching up to Massachusetts on the scorecard ranking, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out there. And further with that, just the cost effectiveness conversation within our region, and I know Cyrus has mentioned this too for their region, but it really has taken off here. And I know last week we had a workshop in Connecticut talking about this with the different stakeholders in our region and how do we address this moving forward with our energy efficiency programs, bringing the National Standard Practice Manual into that conversation, and again, just a lot of different states reevaluating how they determine if programs are cost effective, bringing the non-energy impacts into the conversation there. So we're really excited to see that play out throughout the region over even just as soon as last week having these conversations. But Rhode Island is definitely leading the herd there with their state policy framework. Thank you.
And this is Cyrus. I know we're at time, so I'll be quick. In addition to the regulatory proceedings in Mississippi and Louisiana, we've seen state legislative or executive-led activity in North and South Carolina. So North Carolina is actively involved in a comprehensive renewable energy and DER legislation, and we're watching to see whether that sets the groundwork for a conversation about energy efficiency in that state. And South Carolina is in the process of developing a state energy plan which addresses utility-delivered energy efficiency programs. And similarly, we're involved in that conversation to understand where policymakers want to go with energy efficiency in that state. So those are two to watch that may have impact on future editions of this scorecard.
And this is Grace with ACEEE. I just wanted to add that I think it's very exciting to see the results of the scorecard. Those top performers at in the scorecard are really proving that higher savings are possible and are really leading the way. And we're seeing energy savings grow year over year. So there are many opportunities, and it's really exciting to see both that growth in energy savings and a lot of the engagement that we've received out of this report already, including from the regional organizations and from individual utilities. So I think there's a lot of growth potential, and that's really exciting to see.
Okay, and with that, I'd like to thank our speakers for joining us today. Grace, Cyrus, Samantha, and Stacey, thank you again. And the slide here on the screen now shows some upcoming conferences that ACEEE is hosting, so I urge you to take a look at those. The information on those are also available on our website. We did receive a number of questions throughout the session, and what we may try to do, no promises just yet, is send out a response to some of these questions so folks can hear some more information on that, because we definitely didn't have time to get through all. So again, thanks everyone for joining, and we appreciate you joining us today.